Coming in at number 5, Cyclops. I mean, we can't have a giant creature list without including one of the most infamous giants in history, Cyclops. Hailing from Greek mythology and then later Roman mythology, the Cyclops were giant one-eyed creatures who can be distinguished in 3 groups. In Hesiod's theogony, they are the brothers Brontes, Steropus, and Argus, I think, who provided Zeus with his weapon, the thunderbolt. In Homer's Odyssey, they are an uncivilized group of shepherds, the brethren of Polyphemus encountered by Odysseus. Cyclopses were also famous as the builders of the Cyclopean walls of Mycenae and Tyrannus. For the sake of avoiding confusion, let's focus our attention to the Homeric Cyclopses. In an episode of Homer's Odyssey, the hero Odysseus encounters the Cyclops Polyphemus, the son of Poseidon, a one-eyed man-eating giant who lives with his fellow Cyclopses in a distant land. They live in the world of men rather than among the gods. Homeric Cyclopses are presented as uncivilized shepherds, savages, and have no regard for Zeus. They live solitary lives and have no government. They are said to be inhospitable to strangers, slaughtering and eating all who come to their land. Coming in at number 4, Corb or the Fomorians. The Fomorians are a supernatural race in Irish mythology, often portrayed as hostile and monstrous beings who come from under the sea or the earth. However, later they were portrayed as giants and sea raiders and enemies of Ireland's first settlers. They appear to have once been gods who represent the harmful or destructive powers of nature, personifications of chaos, darkness, death, blight, and drought. In Old and Middle Irish, the race is typically called the Fomor or Fomori, with an individual member being called a Fomor. They are often regarded as malevolent spirits dwelling underwater and in the nether regions of the earth, before later being portrayed as the aforementioned sea raiders. This was heavily influenced by the Viking raids on Ireland that were taking place during this time. Oftentimes they were depicted as having the body of a man and the head of a goat, and according to an 11th century book, they are said to have one eye, one arm, and one leg. Coming in at 3, Titans. Hailing from Greek mythology, the Titans were the pre-Olympian gods. According to the theogony of Hesiod, they were the 12 children of the primordial parents Uranus and his mother Gaia, with 6 male Titans, Oceanus, Cous, Creus, Hyperion, Lapetus, and Cronus, and 6 female Titans called the Titanides. Cronus mated with his sister Rhea, and together they became the first generation of Olympians. Zeus and his 5 siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Descendants of the Titans are also called Titans. The Titans were also former gods, the generation of gods preceding the Olympians. They were ultimately overthrown as part of the Greek succession myth, which told how Cronus seized power from his father Uranus and ruled the cosmos with the Titans as his subordinates. Now Cronus and the Titans were in turn defeated and replaced as the ruling pantheon of gods by Zeus and the Olympians in a tenure referred to as the Titanomachy. As a result of the war, Cronus and the vanquished Titans were banished from the upper world, being held imprisoned under guard in Tartarus, although according to history some of these Titans were allowed to remain free. Coming in at 2, Fatchin. Hailing from Scottish folklore, the Fatchan or Fatchin is a monster or giant described by John Francis Campbell in popular tales of the West Highlands as having a single eye in the middle of its face, a single hand protruding from its chest instead of arms, and a single leg emerging from its central axis. Not only that, but it has a single tuft of hair on the top of its head, which Campbell says, I quote, "It were easier to take a mountain from the root than to bend that tuft." Quite the tuft indeed. However, Campbell isn't the only writer to reference the giant. Douglas Hyde did so too in his collection of Irish folklore called Beside the Fires. I quote, "He held a very thick iron flay club in his skinny hand and 20 chains out of it, and 50 apples on each chain of them, and a great venomous spell on each great apple of them, and a girdle of the skins of deer and roebuck around the thing that was his body, and one eye in the forehead of his black-faced countenance, and one bare, hard, very hairy hand coming out of his chest, and one veiny, thick-soled leg supporting him, and a close, firm, dark blue mantle of twisted, hard, thick feathers protecting his body. And surely he was more like unto devil than to man." Now, though hailing from different countries, both descriptions seem to represent branches of a common Gaelic tradition. Finally, coming in at number 1, Caicus. Hailing from Roman mythology, Caicus, meaning bad, was a fire-breathing giant and the son of Vulcan. He was ultimately killed by Hercules after terrorizing the Aventine Palatine Hill before the founding of Rome. However, let's go back. Caecus lived in a cave in Italy on the future site of Rome. To survive, he feasted on the flesh of humans and would nail the heads of victims to the doors of his cave. Now, like I said, he would later be defeated by Hercules, and according to Evander, Hercules stopped to pasture the cattle he had stolen from Geryon near Caecus' lair. As Hercules slept, the giant took a liking to the cattle and stole 8 of them, 4 bulls and 4 cows, dragging them by their tails so as to leave a trail in the wrong direction. When Hercules awoke, the remaining cattle made suggestive noises towards the cave, so Hercules, now angry, stormed towards the cave, and a terrified Caecus blocked the entrance with a vast, immovable boulder, so Hercules quite literally tore off the top of the mountain to reach him. Caecus responded with spewing fire and smoke, while Hercules attacked with tree branches and rocks the size of millstones. Hercules eventually leapt into the cave, aiming for the area where the smoke was heaviest, and grabbed Caecus, strangling the monster to death. According to Virgil in Book 8 of the Aeneid, Hercules grasped Caecus so tightly that his eyes popped out and there was no blood left in his throat.
Off at number 5, Destroy All Monsters, 1968. Alright, probably the best place to start if you're not sure what kaiju cinema is by ramming together pretty much every single kaiju ever and making them throw down in a titanic battle to the death. And I mean, it's probably important to note that this movie features perhaps the most kaiju in any giant monster movie ever. We're talking Godzilla, Mothra, Rodan, King Ghidorah, Anguirus, Manila. It goes without saying, but they're pretty big players, and obviously anytime Godzilla, Mothra and Rodan get together, you know that some pretty big stuff is going to go down. Directed by Ishiro Honda, one of the biggest players in the Showa era of kaiju cinema and one of Toho Studios' best and brightest assets, Destroy All Monsters takes place in a time of pure utopia, where world peace has been achieved by the year 1999, and all of the giant monsters that have previously tried to destroy the planet have instead been captured and confined to an area known as Monsterland. However, just when all seems well, all of these monsters are broken out of their metaphorical giant prison and instead mind controlled by an alien species known as the Kilax, who then send the kaiju to attack major cities across the planet. We're talking Godzilla tearing apart New York City, Rodan invading Moscow, and Mothra and her larval offspring laying waste to the cities of Beijing. Thankfully, Earth's defenses, spearheaded by the United Nations Science Committee in their first appearance, eventually wrestled back control of the poor mind control kaiju. But that's when the Kilax send their biggest and baddest nasty of all time, King Ghidorah himself, and then stuff really gets blown to smithereens. The thing is, although not quite campy enough to be mid-70s kaiju brilliance, and not quite gritty enough to be mid-80s and 90s kaiju raw action, Destroy All Monsters sits somewhere between the two, and yet, most importantly, it's just pure fun. Destroy All Monsters is insane, and it's a time where Toho Studios figured, what the heck, we've got all of these monsters, we may as well put them through their paces. Although not a highlight of kaiju history in any way, it sets the precedent for many more to come. Swinging in at number 4, Giant Monsters All Out Attack, 2001. And if you're looking for a real mouthful, then why don't you try Godzilla, Mothra and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. Yeah, because who cares about film titles anymore, right? Thankfully for us though, although colloquially dubbed GMK by kaiju monster movie fans, 2001's Giant Monsters All Out Attack is perhaps one of the most accessible kaiju movies ever made. The thing is, whilst it certainly embraces the unabashed cheesiness that earlier Showa era and Heisei era kaiju movies were so famed for, this one was made during the short period known as the Millennium era. And strangely enough, much like the zeitgeist captured in that period of cinema, GMK is surprisingly dark. For a kaiju movie, it's gritty as all hell, and although not perfect in any sense, there are moments in this movie that really turn the franchise on its head. And to address the kaiju elephant in the room, yes, Giant Monsters All Out Attack is hated by certain portions of the fanbase, given the fact that King Ghidorah, the ultimate adversary of all time, is instead the good guy in this story. And that means only one thing: our beloved Godzilla is the villain. Written and directed by Shusuke Kaneko, GMK features Godzilla as a ravenous returning force during a time where the world and the brave and noble JSDF are nervous about where and when Godzilla will strike again. Unbeknownst to them though, Godzilla is actually possessed by the souls of the dead that were lost during the events of World War II. And then the only thing left to do is for an unlikely alliance to be forged between Mothra, King Ghidorah and Baragon. Although the themes aren't always clear in this movie, and although they miss more often than they hit, GMK is one of the most complete giant monster movies of recent times. Although the unconventional Godzilla is kind of a hated theme, start to finish, GMK is entertaining. And that's the most important thing. Next up at number 3, King Kong vs. Godzilla, 1962. I'll be damned if this isn't one of the finest moments in kaiju cinema of all time. Really, to be a fan of this type of cinema, you have to adhere to a certain set of disbelief. When there's a guy in a lizard suit rolling around a fake background, yeah, sometimes it doesn't always work. And whilst that is certainly the case in 1962 King Kong vs. Godzilla, holy moly, if there aren't some absolutely astounding moments of cinema to be found here. It's crazy because what's so great about this genre is that Toho Studios just didn't care. Not in the sense that they didn't put their heart and soul into these movies, because that's exactly what they did. They just didn't do things by a certain playbook. Hollywood be damned as far as they were concerned, because they wanted to put one guy in a lizard suit and one guy in a gorilla outfit and then make the best damn movie that they could. This is the culmination of that very spirit, King Kong vs. Godzilla, and whilst next year there is a remake coming our way, if you've got a spare 90 minutes, just give this movie a watch. Really, this is one of the finest examples of kaiju cinema going, and it's certainly worth your attention. Again, directed by Ishiro Honda and written by Shinichi Sekizawa, the story behind King Kong vs. Godzilla originally began with the giant Lord of the Apes actually throwing down with some version of a giant Frankenstein monster, which, let's not beat about the bush, would have been absolutely awesome, but thankfully for us, Toho snapped out of it and realised that the giant lizard king would be a far greater adversary. Obviously, the narrative behind this movie is pretty self-explanatory, but the cultural impact that this movie has had on science fiction cinema is kind of staggering. There are so many urban myths and legends about this movie that it's worth experiencing that just for the fact, and whilst most of them aren't exactly true, the ending to King Kong vs. Godzilla is one of the most epic conclusions of 20th century cinema. This movie is brilliant, and its historical significance should not be forgotten. Coming in at number 2, Gojira, Guardian of the Universe, 1995. Finally, we have a place to put this movie. And yeah, whatever. This movie isn't scary in the slightest, but my word, if this movie isn't all kinds of marvelous, then I don't know what is. The thing is, we get it. We love Godzilla, we love King Kong, they're the greatest, but until this movie, Gojira was one of the most overlooked kaiju monsters of all time. Put it this way, Guardian of the Universe was both a reboot of the franchise and also the 9th movie featuring the turtle-shelled monster hero. Gojira is persistent, and the payoff, surprisingly, was one of the greatest kaiju movies of all time. Gojira is a kaiju like no other. He's a massive, fire-breathing, prehistoric turtle, and much like his Godzilla brethren, he was mutated via exposure to nuclear weapons. At the start of the kaiju franchise, Gojira was an all-consuming, aggressive force, but slowly, as the franchise evolved, Gojira took a backseat to his other more famous kaiju co-stars, and eventually was forced into a niche, to say the least. You see, eventually Gojira took on a less malevolent force, and instead, he became a defender of humanity, particularly human children, and a guardian of our planet against extraterrestrial alien forces. All of this finally culminated in his reinvention of a reinvention in 1995's Gojira, Guardian of the Universe, and this movie is astounding because of it. Written by Kazunori Ito and directed by Shusuke Kaneko, again, Gojira, Guardian of the Universe embodies that same spirit that Toho Studios have perfected over the decades. This movie is just freaking fun. It's so fantastically bizarre that you can't help but be entertained. Gyros flying through the skies, attacking people left, right and centre, and the giant fire-breathing turtle, who is a friend to all human children, saving the day. In many ways, this entry embodies everything that we love about kaiju cinema, and as a side note, the following Gojira-centric movies are also worth a watch. Again, if you're looking for some 90 minutes of entertainment, you really cannot go wrong with Gojira. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Gojira, 1954. It just has to be, doesn't it? And whilst over here at Top 5 Scary Videos, we do indeed favour doing things a little differently when it comes to picking our particular movie entries, we don't need that here. You see, kaiju monster movies already speak for themselves in that regard, or well, roar for themselves, I guess. And 1954's Gojira, the most important giant monster movie that has ever emerged from Japan, exemplifies that fact entirely. This is the definitive Godzilla movie, and still to this day, over 60 years later, 1954's Gojira is unrivaled. It is astounding how well this movie is held up, and much like some of the suit work scene in King Kong vs. Godzilla, some of the scenes that were captured in this movie were hallmark moments in science fiction cinema. Following its release, Ishiro Honda, the man behind 1954's Gojira and one of Toho Studios' most legendary kaiju contributions, said, "If Godzilla had been a dinosaur or some other animal, he would have been killed with just one cannonball. But if he were equal to an atomic bomb, we wouldn't know what to do. So I took the characteristics of an atomic bomb and then applied them to Godzilla." You see, this is exactly why kaiju monster movies captured something so special. They exemplified an era, a period of Japanese history that was still trying to recover from the horrors of the Second World War. In fact, the destruction seen throughout this black and white B-movie, metaphorically speaking, still can rival some of the most expensive and well-produced giant monster movies ever made. 1954's Gojira is a masterclass in how to make a giant monster truly terrifying. Low angles, ample pacing on the reveal, high-angled shots of the ant-like human survivors fleeing in terror. Gojira is sci-fi horror 101. Whilst this genre isn't exactly for everyone, the influence it has had on the horror genre is undeniable. This movie cemented Godzilla as the definitive, unrivaled giant monster, and since its release way back when in 1954, few films have come close to toppling it.
Again, at number 5, we've got SCP-1548. Quick, name some enormous things. Elephants, office buildings, Mount Everest. Now, these are all good guesses. Yeah, they're big, but here's the deal. Pretty much everything on this list is going to dwarf something you could conceivably behold on Earth. Yeah, it's gonna be one of those. 1548 is known as the Hateful Star. Stars, as you might already know, are huge. Like our sun is one of the smaller varieties going around. Try to wrap your head around that for a moment. In fact, this star is more than just a star, it's multiple solar phenomena. There's SCP-1548-1, which is a series of sunspots, each 40,000 by 15,000 kilometers in size. About 23 hours after they appear, they converge, becoming one enormous solar prominence, taking the shape of thaumaturgic symbols. Then there are 1548-2 and 3, which are sunspots and symbols that form under different circumstances, but are usually pretty huge too. These occurrences cause a whole lot of insane stuff to happen, from inflicting intense psychological damage on people who behold them, to strengthening materials, to causing weapons affected by the symbol to annihilate stuff around their areas of effect. In fact, a recent event has caused irreversible changes to our solar system. A rapid recurrence of 1548-1 events has led to a dense cloud of ionizing radiation to form around our solar system, totally changing the night sky. The Foundation has started to disseminate information to keep the public calm, but the effects of this change in the sky have started to be noticed. Folks who witness certain things in the night sky have had their minds altered by the malice 1548 seems to emit, and powerful weapons have leveled large areas. There's something in there about a subset of folks known as Orthothans who seem to be waging some kind of war. The O5 Council has been voting on what to do for a while now, but I'm not exactly sure what's gonna happen next, so wish you the best of luck. Coming in at number 4, we've got SCP-3125. Now, if you want to read this one, you've got to know the code to get in. That's right, it's locked behind a keypad, and only those with a secret password are getting in. How do I know the password? Well, I'm special. You're not, but I'll give you a hint anyway. How many flavors in a standard roll of Lifesavers? How many guys at the burger joint that fries their fries in peanut oil? What's 7 minus 2? What's the smallest dollar bill in Canada? A number that rhymes with alive. Use that as you will. I've got plausible deniability if you guys break into the number pad without being allowed to be there. Enter at your own risk. This SCP is quite a mind boink, described as an extremely large, highly aggressive, metastasized meme complex. It started outside our reality and now it's right up in it. I always knew the rising popularity of memes would be the death of us all. It's adapted for survival in much harsher conditions than we can provide, and therefore humans don't really have any sort of defense against 3125. When someone's affected by it, they become incapable of entertaining weaker ideas. Their whole being is then devoted to the propagation of 3125. So this thing can spread fast through the ideas of our weaker minds. And just like propaganda, you're not immune to it. Nope, not even you. No, you're not special. As of right now, it's not entirely present in our reality. If it ever managed to manifest completely, the knowledge of it would spread throughout the world very quickly, likely ending anybody's ability to do anything about it in less than 12 hours. Even now, folks who learn about it end up dead very quickly. The worst part is, most folks who are infected, and therefore are infectious, don't really know it, or they can't conceive of knowing it. Once 3125 makes its way into someone's mind, they forget about it and they don't even notice it. It uses some sort of brain-altering thing to make sure that nobody's aware of it. The way the Foundation describes it is like the stuff mosquitoes use to prevent you from noticing that they're sucking your blood. But instead of your blood, they're like taking over your brain, and it's not itchy, it's just gonna kill you. Right now, there's no real way to fight it. A scientist suggested creating an irreality amplifier, but that would require the folks building it to understand what they were building, and then they would have to know about the meme, and then they'd get infected by it. So let's just hope that the Foundation keeps it in check indefinitely, because if this gigantic mass of memetic information makes its way into our reality, we're toast. Coming in at number 3, we've got SCP-1682. Sandworms! Hell yeah, I feel like that's good enough of a description. I don't need to say anything else, just sandworms. Okay, I guess I should explain the whole thing. See, these are large, segmented, worm-like entities that exist in the sun. The good folks over at the Foundation have estimated that the one that we've designated 1682 is over 28,000 kilometers long. It appears to dive and loop for long periods of time, often roaming the surface of the photosphere for 3 to 4 months before diving down and disappearing for 4 to 8 months. The people investigating it believed it to be a permanent fixture at that point, but one day it up and fired its way across the galaxy. It emerged from the photosphere at a speed of 1045.5 kilometers per second and was last sighted passing Pluto. Now, get this. Some folks are calling it a solar tapeworm. That's right, it lives in the bowels of the sun until it's sapped enough energy and then heads off on its merry way. It's an image I didn't need. Coming in at number 2, we've got SCP-2859. This one literally mirrors an entire quadrant of the solar system, so if that's not big, I don't know what to tell you. Try not to feel too dwarfed in its shadow, you know, we're all tiny specks of insignificant nothing if you really think about it. So isn't that a little bit comforting? No? Not to you? Okay, well, on with the explanation anyway. It will manifest in enclosed, unused space, eventually breaching the object encapsulating it. Expeditions inside have shown that celestial objects do indeed exist within it in the precise locations that they would be otherwise. It also tends to pull anything that makes contact with its threshold in. Otherwise, it doesn't really affect the area around it, it just kind of is there. It's weird and potentially micro-radiation inducing, but not terrible in of itself. But there is a giant species of giant serpentine predators around 80,000 kilometers in length that do seem to follow this anomaly wherever it goes. And anything that it pulls in, they will consume. So that's not good. Instances of 2859 have been spotted dangerously close to Earth too, so you better keep an eye out. And finally at number 1, we've got SCP-3200. Get this, we've made some claims about enormous stuff in this video, but this SCP is literally light years in diameter. 300 million light years to be precise. That is a big anomaly. It's expanding by about 1 million light years per year too. This void could potentially collapse the universe. That's how huge it is. If it were 2009, it would be a great source for run-ups to Yo Mama jokes. However, because we've moved past that as a society, I'll avoid stooping that low. Suffice it to say, this is one gigantic SCP. The exact properties of this thing are currently unknown too. It was discovered by civilian scientists, and the folks who investigated it most closely ran into some issues. The Peregrine expedition took some experimental tech and ran with it, hoping to find something useful within the SCP-3200 void. Taking advantage of temporal sinks, the crew was able to travel into the heart of the anomaly in a relatively short period of time. They arrived in the void and saw nothing but blackness. No stars, no galaxies, true void action. Eventually, a box showed up, surprising the crew. Inside was a CD containing a video of the captain talking to camera. He claimed they'd been trying to slow the anomaly's growth to little success, which disturbed the crew. Over time, reality began to act different, and even more different than they expected going in. They also managed to amass quite the collection of footage of the captain speaking about the anomaly. None of these elaborated on what the anomaly was actually doing though. Eventually, tragically, they got to the source of the matter. After witnessing thousands of different iterations of himself investigate the void over a period of what could be thousands of years, it became clear to the captain that space-time was torn and had been rending itself apart. The things they've seen are echoes of different timelines, produced, consumed, and repurposed by the Abyss. There's no way to fix it, although each iteration of the crew does their best. It's growing larger, consuming more, and yet there is nothing we can do about it. In the last words of Captain Kuznetsov, we've seen into the abyss, and by God, it hates us.
And at number 5, we've got Slattern.
Pacific Rim is just such a wicked kaiju movie, eh? I mean, technically I don't know many people who would classify it as horror, but the smattering of enormous entities is enough to get any monster fan excited. Throughout the flick, it manages to one-up each monster with a bigger, badder beastie. Even the first one could be the main event in a lesser movie, but Guillermo del Toro does not let up. After fighting their way through all the categories of kaiju, the folks from the Jaeger Foundation have one final challenge, the first ever Category 5. Slattern. This thing is wicked. Over 180 meters tall and weighing in at nearly 7,000 tons, it is a force to be reckoned with. It blows all the other kaiju out of the water, which is kind of funny when you think about it because of that nuclear payload that gets detonated moments after it shows up. You know, because all the water is blown away for a moment. Okay, focus. Slattern isn't just huge, it's dangerous. It has 3 insane tails that can pierce armor and whip around at Mach speed. It has a freaky hammerhead that can be used to slam people to smithereens, and it's so toxic and nuclear that its insides are glowing blue. Wow. And the crowning jewel of all sorts of kaiju fits in well here too. It's pretty much immune to any and all attacks. Like, humanity had to develop Jaegers in order to even have a chance against these beasts, and as the first Category 5 to make it through the breach, Slattern is extremely resilient. It takes a long fight, a nuclear explosion, and a nuclear turbine blast point blank to the chest to take it down. That is one heck of a movie monster. Coming in at number 4, we've got Sandworms. We've talked about graboids and ass blasters a few times in this channel, but I can't recall any time where I discussed Dune. That ends today with an acknowledgement of one of the most iconic monsters of all time. Oh man, this might not be horror proper either. It's more sci-fi, but oh well. Sandworms are absolutely bonkers. An average specimen can grow to be over 450 meters long, which is half a kilometer. And those are just the observed ones. It's thought that some worms that live in the southern pole areas can grow up to 1,000 meters, although it's never been confirmed. Still, the fact that worms of that size is even possible is nuts, and that is just the length. Sure, it's crazy that they're that long, but their maws are incomprehensibly large too. Some of the gaping mouth holes can be 120 or even 240 meters across. They could swallow entire buildings, no chewing required. Just absolutely enormous, these ones. They're so big, people on the planet Arrakis use them as their distance measuring units. How long will it take to get there? Oh, about 5 sandworms. The way their bodies work is pretty nuts too. See, their insides resemble something like a furnace and generate heat and flames. Imagine being a living being who heats up to the point of producing fire. Life is pain, I suppose. Although their tough skin and scales are up to the challenge. These outer pieces of armor are so tough they're basically impenetrable, although if you know what you're doing, the scales can be used to ride the worms, which is pretty cool. Coming in at number 3, we've got Kroll. Alright, we're 3 for 3 here, not exactly hitting the horror nail on the head, but giant monsters are scary all on their own. Whether or not they're featured in true horror movies doesn't matter. Now that I've done my mental gymnastics, let's talk about this gargantuan Doctor Who beast. Ages ago, giant squid were brought to Delta 3, a moon orbiting Delta Magna. Usually it's a bad idea to introduce brand new species to an unprepared ecosystem, and this proves to be true once again when Kroll eats a swampy priest along with a holy relic. After this unfortunate meal, Kroll begins to mutate in unexpected ways. The biggest change of all was definitely his size. Kroll was suddenly a mile wide and hundreds of meters tall. He promptly became the god of Delta 3, living under the mud and munching on whatever he get his tentacles around. The swampies that inhabited the moon began to worship Kroll and saw him as a religious deity. Now they even call the times he surfaces manifestations. I mean, it makes sense. If you were a primitive species of green people living on a moon and a mile-wide squid kept showing up, you'd probably think it was a higher power too. A mile wide. They also rely on the beast to kill their enemies, which he is very capable of doing. Well, until the good doctor rolls up. But hey, not even the biggest of big monsters can stand up to a Time Lord. Coming in at number 2, we've got King Ghidorah. Oh, baby. See, I could have populated this entire list with entries from the Godzilla verse, but then it would just become a Godzilla list. I guess Godzilla Earth could have made the cut too, which would be fun, but it's just not on the agenda today. So I went through all of the iconic beasts and monsters that have at some point fought or teamed up or existed at the same time as Godzilla and tried to find the biggest one. Godzilla itself was up for consideration, but if you've ever seen these two square off, you'll know who the larger lad is. Sporting 3 heads and a wingspan that can block out the sun, King Ghidorah is a massive monster. It makes plenty of appearances across all sorts of movies, but we'll focus on his appearance in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, which, you know, come Come on. Well, this Hydra-like being stands at 150 meters tall and has a wingspan of 175. If you want big, you've got it. And those wings better be big too, as he weighs over 70,000 tons. It's a miracle it can get off the ground at all. But once it's up there, it can reach Mach 3. Many Godzilla monsters end up teaming up with the titular icon from time to time, but never King Ghidorah. The two are diametrically opposed, arch rivals, never to see eye to eye on anything, and I can respect that long-standing beef. Between these two, it's on sight. He's a force of pure evil, meant to destroy anything and everything it can. There's no good lurking within, no greater purpose beyond destruction, and he's really good at destruction. Ghidorah can fire gravity beams and destroy city blocks in an instant. He can generate lightning with his wings. He can suck the life force out of anyone foolish to get close. So size isn't the only terrifying thing about this monster. He's got an RPG protagonist's toolbox worth of powers too. And coming in at number 1, we've got Clover. The main monster from Cloverfield. Clover is pretty big, right? Can rampage through New York, toss the Statue of Liberty, and generally cause a lot of trouble. But get this, the towering entity that peers down at the camera in the film's penultimate scene isn't even fully grown. It's just a baby. No wonder it was so cranky. But for real, Clover can get way, way bigger. In the Cloverfield paradox, we get an up-close look at the full-grown abomination. As an escape capsule heads back to Earth, a welcome party is organized, and by welcome party I mean giant monster, and by organized I mean he sticks its head through the clouds. They're cumulus clouds too, so the monster is poking his head through cloud cover at around 1,000 meters above ground level. And the pod is landing over water, meaning that the monster is likely partially submerged too. The average depth of the ocean is a few kilometers deep, and we can't prove that the monster is standing anywhere particularly deep, but I'll let you draw your own conclusions there. We know that the baby is around 100 meters tall, and we know that the adult is poking its head through the clouds above the ocean, so you tell me how tall you think it really is. It definitely dwarfs anything else we've discussed so far. Sheesh. So, does anyone have some sort of inferiority complex now? Are you terrified of getting stomped by one of these and them not even noticing? The world of monsters is pretty crazy, and the bigger they are, the more existential dread they instill. What'd you think of the list? Can you conjure up any bigger monsters? Who's the coolest giant monster going? Make sure you let me know down in the comments.
5. Dark Was the Night, 2014.
Probably just some punk kids playing a prank, huh?
Yeah, why would they come out this far?
Never seen nothing like it. All the animals just vanished.
Alright guys, let's be honest, it's pretty difficult to be completely terrified by any sort of monster movie given enough scale, because the bigger they are, the easier they are to completely phase out any kind of tangible fear. Take note on that, because in this list we'll be scaling our expectations down a little bit, but it may also leave you scratching your head and asking the question, what's the difference between a giant monster movie and a creature feature? I don't get it, Jack. And the answer is, not a lot really, and also, I don't really get it either, but primarily it relies on a trope that coincidentally movies like Godzilla pioneered, and that is the fear of the unknown, but not in the cosmic horror sense, but in not knowing exactly what we're dealing with until it's too late. Let me introduce you to this movie, Dark Was the Night, a straight to DVD B movie that surprisingly is absolutely brilliant, and more importantly, it's pretty bloody scary, and it packs one of the most well-written endings to any kind of monster-based horror, I think. And you know what? It also stars Kevin Durand in the leading role, the guy who plays Kimi in Lost, Harbard in Vikings, and loads of other mid-caliber roles through movies and television. And in this instance, it's an absolute pleasure to see him take the lead, because he certainly can carry a movie if given the chance. Written by Tyler Heisel and directed by Jack Keller, Dark Was the Night tells the tale of the small isolated town of Maiden Woods, where Sheriff Paul Shields, played by Durand, is investigating a series of bizarre disappearances alongside his new deputy, Donnie Saunders, played by Lucas Haas, who is also pretty damn good in this film. Obviously, as you may imagine, the disappearances have something to do with an ancient evil that lingers in the woods, and that's all I'll say, because the writing behind this movie is pretty remarkable, and for a B movie it's even more impressive. The creature design is fantastic, the pacing is spot on, and the finale to this movie will leave you pretty astounded in some way or another. More importantly, it's just downright entertaining, and whilst these monsters aren't exactly King Kong, they're full to the teeth with horror. Swinging in at number 4, The Monster, 2016.
I know what you think, okay? I know what you think. What is it? What?
And again, another movie that came out in the past decade that seemingly flew beneath the radar and still is pretty damn brilliant. The thing is though, whilst this movie certainly does exactly what it says on the tin, as in, well, the name of this movie is pretty damn clear, it's also important to note that this movie certainly isn't for everyone. If I said to you that it's an A24 movie, then that may clear things up a little, but also if you're in the mood for a subversion of the genre that also deals with some pretty damn terrifying psychological implications regardless, then yeah, this is certainly the movie for you. Also, giant man-eating monsters abound, and all that jazz. Written and directed by Brian Bertino, the man responsible for 2008's The Strangers. If I had to draw a genre comparison for this movie, I'd say that 2016's The Monster is to monster movies as 2012's The Battery is to zombie movies. Yeah, it takes a little bit more to enjoy than the typical sit back and witness the destruction, but that does not mean it's not worthwhile. It tells the tale of Kathy, played by Zoe Kazan, who is pretty remarkable here, and her 10-year-old daughter Lizzie, played by Ella Ballantyne, who are driving to her father's house as it's his turn to share Lizzie's custody. The thing is, from the off, we're overloaded with some pretty stark information. Lizzie, a 10-year-old girl, is sick and tired of taking care of her abusive, alcoholic mother Kathy, and she makes it pretty damn clear that she intends to live with her father permanently. While as the trip stretches on and darkness descends, the pair hit a wolf in their car, killing it. However, on closer inspection, it seems that the wolf was already on its last legs, as it had been attacked by something far bigger and far more ferocious. And yeah, as you may imagine, the rest is spoilers, but really, 2016's The Monster is such a refreshing departure from the norm that it's a must-see in my books. But it also paints itself with the same vivid tropes of the monster genre, as we catch glimpses of a far more terrifying creature in the periphery. Next up at number 3, Cloverfield, 2008. You know what, guys? I've said it before and I will say it again. Cloverfield doesn't get the credit that it deserves. And as far as giant monster movies go that actually do justice to the science fiction horror genre as a whole, then Cloverfield is perhaps one of the closest and most recent depictions of just exactly that. Cloverfield is awesome, and also as a side note, if the whisperings are to be believed, we'll be getting a hopefully worthy sequel to this movie sooner rather than later, which is reason enough to be excited really. The thing is, we spoke in the intro about kaiju movies and how they are the quintessential example of giant monster movies, but as we also mentioned, they also aren't exactly scary. Cloverfield, in my opinion, is the remedy to that, and in turn it was inspired by the reverence that the author J.J. Abrams has as a filmmaker for Godzilla and all of his friends. His intention was to give life to the western version of the kaiju genre, and he did exactly that, whilst also staying true to the promise of horror. For those of you that haven't yet seen it or brushed it off as another Hollywood cash grab, please give it a chance, it's awesome. Written by Drew Goddard, the man behind the brilliant Netflix Daredevil series, and directed by Matt Reeves, the man behind the Planet of the Apes series, Cloverfield of course was put together by J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot Studios with the intention of breathing life to giant monster movies for a western audience. Shot from a found footage perspective, it tells the tale of a man named Rob Hawkins and his then girlfriend Beth, who whilst during a party in downtown New York City find themselves in the midst of a giant monster attack in which the city itself is torn asunder by a terrifying unknown alien lifeform. You see, the original Godzilla movies have analytically been related to the devastating World War II atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a metaphorical cultural expression of the tragedy that unfolded. Subsequently, in many ways, Cloverfield has been tied to New York City's own tragic destructive event with the 9/11 attacks. For that reason, and that reason alone, I think Cloverfield deserves its place as a cultural titan of sci-fi and horror. It truly does. Coming in at number 2, The Host, 2006. Alright guys, this is where things get difficult, because in many ways, 2006 The Host is perhaps one of the finest monster movies ever made. Period. This movie truly is remarkable, and whilst we've covered it on several occasions in our Korean horror movies list, in relation to monster movies, we really can't let it slip on by like an amphibious radioactive sea creature slipping beneath a sewer. The thing is though, where it becomes difficult is that like several movies on this list, The Host is a genre mashup of sorts. This is a movie about family and loss and grief, and also a bizarre mixture of action and black comedy that is actually hilarious in parts, in places that it really shouldn't be. I mean, it's a result of South Korean filmmaking as a whole being incredibly transcendent with genre, playing with themes and tropes that Western directors wouldn't otherwise do, and yet truth be told, the results are startling. It makes for a movie the likes of which can't be replicated, and that alone is reason enough to see it. Also, please don't get this movie confused with the 2013 movie The Host, because, yeah, no thank you. Written and directed by Bong Joon-ho, the awesome South Korean director and man behind Snowpiercer, which you should also take a look at if you haven't, The Host tells the tale of Park Gang-do, a slow-witted guy who runs a snack bar on the banks of the Hum River, who witnesses his daughter Hyun-so get kidnapped by a gigantic, grossly mutated amphibious creature that was created by a secretive chemical spill and subsequent cover-up by US authorities, which then subsequently sends the city of Seoul into complete and utter mayhem, as you may imagine, really. Obviously, spoilers are abound from here on in, so we'll leave it at that, but really, The Host does something incredibly impressive with the giant monster genre. It's terrifying, it's hilarious in places, and most importantly, this giant monster movie actually has heart. Maybe even like 3 hearts, actually. Probably. And finally, coming in at number 1 spot, Troll Hunter, 2010. Alright guys, you wanted giant monster movies, you got it. Now, I've certainly ummed and ahed about it, and after lengthy deliberation, I'm fairly certain that this movie delivers everything we've ever wanted when it comes to being awestruck by a species of creature that domineers our very human-sized landscape. Troll Hunter is exactly that. It's smart, it's well executed, and most importantly, this film is gigantic in scale. The thing is, I think quite a lot of people brush this movie off as too ridiculous to ever have been worthwhile, and whilst you may be thinking that the notion of trolls are an overbaked concept in folklore, never mind in horror cinema, the best part of this film is that most importantly, it believes in itself. At not a single point in this movie did I ever stop and think that visual authenticity was important to this film, because it's not. Hey, in some instances the visuals behind this movie aren't exactly great, but you know what supersedes that? The suspension of disbelief. I believe in this movie because from start to finish, much like with Cloverfield, what we are witnessing is the documentation of events from a human perspective. You see, it may seem obvious, but the giants in the movie are far more giant if you see them through the eyes of the terrified creature trying to survive on the ground. Hint, that's us humans. I don't know guys, I could ramble on about this movie for days, but as far as giant monster movies go, Troll Hunter is one of the finest examples ever made. Written and directed by Andre Øvredal, the man responsible for the autopsy of Jane Doe, which is also awesome, Troll Hunter tells the tale of a group of students from Volda University College who set out to make a documentary about a suspected bear poacher out in the Norwegian wilderness. Well, they soon find the bear poacher, but as they also soon find out, it's certainly not bears that he's after, but a far bigger and far more terrifying kind of creature. Honestly guys, Troll Hunter is awesome. It really is. If you haven't yet seen it, please give it a watch. You won't be disappointed.
5. SCP-2107. A soda to diet for. Imagine, if you will, you are walking through the city on a hot day. Perhaps you've been for a jog, or were simply running errands. Either way, you are parched, thirsty, or otherwise dehydrated. You decide to stop in at your local convenience store to grab something to drink. You peruse the refrigerated shelves, passing by the usual suspects. Cans of Coke, Pepsi, and Dr. Pepper. When suddenly, something catches your eye that you've never seen before. A simple silver can with a light blue label called Diet Ghost. Under the name is a small subtitle which promises that this beverage will scare your thirst away. You've never seen this drink advertised, but you think perhaps it is just a new drink on the market. Or perhaps it is a drink normally sold in foreign markets that the store owner has chosen to import. Either way, your curiosity cries out to be satisfied, and you take the silver can to the counter, pay for it, crack it open, and take a swig. At first, nothing seems out of the ordinary. The drink is quenching and refreshing, but before long, something starts to feel off. Things in your home begin to move by themselves. Strange whispers are heard when your home is otherwise empty. Strange phantom figures appear and disappear without warning. Depending on how much of the mystery soda you ingested, the paranormal activity may be more and more intense, and can result in you being harmed or even killed. This is the nature of SCP-2107. The Foundation report claims that anyone who ingests such a drink is to be treated with Class A anesthetics and remitted to the nearest hospital until the mystery drink passes through the victim's system. When the Foundation goes to the store where the soda was purchased, the employees usually claim that they had no knowledge of such a drink, and their inventory records show no record of such a drink being ordered or delivered. This implies that some malevolent force is stocking the shelves of stores and bodegas with a harmful beverage that causes innocent shoppers to experience terrifying encounters with the paranormal. Number 4. SCP-1171. The Prejudiced Window Dweller. The next story begins in Queensland, Australia, where a homeowner moves into a house that was built in 1958. At first, it seems like a normal home, until strange occurrences begin occurring, leading the homeowner to believe that the house is being haunted. The home is investigated by civil authorities, which eventually leads to the home being investigated by the Foundation's agents. What they find is so incredible that they feel the need to purchase the home through a front organization and alter the memories of the previous homeowner. They put a doctor in the home, posing as the new owner, to study it and erect a tall wall around the backyard. All the windows are fitted with shutters, and several agents are moved in for security under the guise of being lodgers. All year, despite changing humidity and weather, the windows are covered by a layer of condensation that cannot be explained. Words suddenly begin appearing, written in the condensation, as if an appendage has been dragged through the moisture. The doctor discovers that by writing messages in the condensation with his finger, he can achieve two-way communication. He learns that the entity is from another dimension and is not human, and worst of all, despises humans. The doctor lies about being a human in order to learn as much as possible. Here is the record of their conversations. "Carbon-based monkeys go home!" Hello? There is a pause. "Someone there?" The doctor introduces himself. "Nice to meet you. I'm Boramont." "Where are you?" "In my living room. Where are you?" "In another living room." "This is neat. How are you doing this?" "Is there no one else there?" Mostly just a bunch of gametes and carbon lovers. Can't hardly stand any of that politically correct crap." "Say, what do you look like?" "Oh, pretty average. 7 tendrils tall, brown carapace, green bioluminescence, blue eyes. You?" "Same." The SCP doesn't ever seem to catch on to the fact that he has befriended a human, and goes on several tangents against the species, calling them air-sucking sacks of protoplasm, and implying that violence might end up being the solution to dealing with them. What is the social order in this SCP's dimension? And how will he react when he realizes a human has been lying to him? Number 3, SCP-1450, the Paint Bug. Imagine the following terrifying situation. You have moved into an old home, or perhaps you are visiting an abandoned warehouse as an urban explorer. Either way, the surroundings are old, and you are a curious type. At first, the building seems normal, but eventually, you make your way to one of the rooms. The wall is painted a light shade of blue, but you are more interested in the contents of the room than the color of the walls. After a moment, you look at the navy wall with confusion. You're almost sure that it was a different color when you came in. You go up to one of the walls to take a better look, when the color suddenly changes again. But this time, you try to move, but realize that the bright shifting colors have mesmerized you, and try as you might, you cannot bring yourself to move. It is at this moment that you realize that a massive colony of insects has covered your body while you have been standing there frozen. As if that wasn't bad enough, they are extremely hungry. They begin to bite, tearing small chunks of your flesh away at an alarming rate. Though you can feel every bite, you still cannot move, as the bugs consume every ounce of you, leaving nothing behind except your bones. This is the hunting pattern of SCP-1450, who have chromatic plating, which allows them to affect a form of metacrosis in order to mimic the dried paint of the walls, before their prey becomes aware of them, at which point they will begin moving together to form the mesmerizing and hypnotic pattern. The Foundation works to contain these creatures and ran the following test to learn more about them. A D-class test subject was sent into the SCP's holding cell, with instructions to wait for 20 minutes. Minutes 1 to 5. D-class subject does nothing. SCP-1450 displays no reaction. Minutes 5 to 7. D-class subject paces about the room. SCP-1450 slowly begins to shift in hue. Minute 7. D-class subject goes to examine nearest portion of SCP-1450. From here, all notations made are based off of studied recordings, as the observation group recalls nothing after minute 7. Analysis shows observation group was affected in the same manner as D-class test subject. Minutes 8 to 13. D-Class subject examines SCP-1450. It responds by shifting its chroma to stun D-Class subject. The examined portion of SCP-1450 holds the color pattern, while the rest of the colony disengages from its nest to begin climbing D-Class subject. Subject appears unaware of the presence of the SCP on his body. Minutes 13 to 20. D-Class subject becomes aware of SCP-1450 and begins striking at the nearest members with his hands. SCP-1450 immediately responds by biting into his legs. Subject is immobilized by pain and collapses. SCP-1450 finishes swarming over his form and proceeds to consume all material present, excluding the subject's bones. SCP-1450 returns to original position and hue. Number 2. SCP-6373, The Puppet Show from Hell. The Goffard Theater in Reading, Pennsylvania was opened in 1860 by Timothy Goggard and would host stage plays, musical performances, and most importantly, puppet shows. The puppets were designed by Goffard himself, with the most notable and consistently featured puppets being an elderly male in black with a beret named Pierre, a big disembodied head with big ears who can only speak in groans named Glouton, a smaller disembodied woman's head named Âme, who is frequently the target of Pierre's violent outbursts, and a long-necked clown named Jacques. Goffard came upon hard times after his divorce and lost the theater before dying soon after. In the years since, the puppets would come to life in the theater at 6 p.m. every night, and would begin to move on their own and perform bizarre and disturbing shows for anyone in attendance. The Foundation began to study the performances, which got darker and more violent and disturbing as time went on. Here is the report from one such performance. Pierre performs a piano duet with Jacques, who is unable to be quiet or still. Though Jacques apologizes, Pierre repeatedly slams the puppet's head into the piano, denting it. When Pierre is finished, viewers note Jacques' jaw has detached completely. Jacques' laughter turns into pained cries as the puppet takes damage. Within minutes, viscous yellow fluid begins to seep from Jacques as it fails to reattach its jaw. Audience describes the liquid's odor as repugnant. Pierre retrieves Âme and forces the puppet to sit in the puddle of the fluid. This event marks the beginning of a trend towards increasingly violent behavior. While puppets sustain heavy damage as a result, they begin each performance fully restored. Notably, Jacques' jaw is never fixed, and the fluid continues to seep from the puppet. Eventually, the puppets seem to have more and more trouble moving and speaking, before one night for their performance, they stood stationary for 18 minutes, before simply bowing and collapsing to the ground, never to move or perform again. Upon inspection, each puppet had human organs within it, with Pierre containing a brain, Jacques a heart, Glouton an indecipherable mass of organs, and Âme being strangely empty. Number 1. SCP-3219, Lost in the Woods. This SCP is a 7 square kilometer region of space in South Mountain National Park. It exhibits a strange aura that makes animals avoid it, and people who enter it often report dizzy spells, hearing strange and unexplained sounds, as well as losing time, or sometimes disappearing completely, without ever being seen again. The Foundation has set up a 90-kilometer exclusion zone in order to attempt to stem these disappearances, but more and more people keep going missing after inadvertently wandering into this area of the woods. An example of the strange occurrences can be found in the Foundation's incident report, number 3210-0219. It reads as follows. 4 members of the Bonafide family were reported missing after failing to return home from a camping trip planned within South Mountain State Park. Park rangers cooperated with local police to organize a search party. On the first day, hunting dogs led the search party to the edge of SCP-3219. The dogs refused to enter. Furthermore, the search party described several incidents of dizziness, lost time, and erratic behavior among nearby wildlife. On the third day, 2 members of the search party disappeared. Shortly after this incident, the Sutherland Sheriff's Office ordered all workers to continue the search for the Bonafide family in a region adjacent to SCP-3219. After a 3-month-long investigation, no traces of the Bonafide family or the 2 missing rescue workers were found.
Number 5 on this list is the whalefish. This fish is like a legendary Pokemon when it comes to how rare it is. Live Science says the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute released footage in August showing a bright orange female whalefish around 6,600 feet deep offshore of Monterey Bay, California. Very little is known about this bizarre fish because of the 3 drastically different appearances of the juveniles, which are called tape tails, males, which are called big nose fish, and females, which are called whalefish. The 3 forms look so different that scientists originally thought that they were 3 different species. This shape-shifting transformation from juvenile to mature females is believed to be one of the most extreme among vertebrates. Whalefish have rarely been seen alive in the deep, so many mysteries remain regarding these remarkable fish. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute tweeted, "Let's pull up this image from the Smithsonian that really shows off exactly how weird this fish is." So here we have the 3 fish, and you can see exactly how different they all are. The Smithsonian says there are other examples of males and females with very different shapes and of animals changing from one shape to another as they grow older. But this is one of the most amazing examples of sexual dimorphism combined with metamorphosis ever found among vertebrates. So we are talking literally about a super rare, shape-shifting fish that in my opinion looks creepy as all holy hell. I'd say that you can find this beast at the bottom of the ocean, but odds are you won't ever even run into it because of how rare it is. We've been exploring the bottom of our oceans for quite some time now, and we are only just starting to learn a little bit about this fish. In all honesty, we really have no idea about it though. Whatever it is or whatever it does, one thing is pretty clear to me though. It's creepy looking, it lives at the bottom of the ocean, and I don't like it. Number 4 on this list is the goblin shark. This fish has got to be at the top of everyone's lists when it comes to the grossest looking creatures in the world. National Geographic says, swishing through the deep sea, a goblin shark notices a small, yummy looking squid. The animal inches towards its prey, but as the fish closes in, the snack starts to dart away. So the shark thrusts its jaw 3 inches out of its mouth. The jaw is connected to 3-inch long flaps of skin that can unfold from its snout. The predator then grabs the squid in its teeth. After scarfing down the meal, the shark fits its jaw back into its mouth and swims off. That's right guys, a goblin shark's top and bottom teeth are attached to ligaments or bands of skin tissue tucked into its mouth. When prey is just out of reach, the shark extends the elastic tissue out of the mouth to nab the grub. This allows the animal to chow down on snacks such as teleost fish and squid. It also makes the shark one jaw-dropping fish. These disgusting looking creatures like to live right at the bottom of the ocean and are native to the oceans around Japan. There are also some of them off of South Africa and in the ocean water surrounding Portugal. They can grow to be 12 feet long and weigh almost 500 pounds. These aren't monsters, but they may as well be. A 500-pound beast with a detachable jaw that looks like a goblin just chilling at the deepest, darkest part of the ocean. I truly cannot think of a whole lot of creatures I would rather run into than this freaking thing. Number 3 on this list is the Proboscis Worm. I don't care what anyone says, this has to be a monster. Just based on literally how freaking gross it is, it needs to be qualified as a monster. This species is also known as ribbon worms, and there are actually a ton of ribbon worms in the world. The ones I'm talking about reside deep at the bottom of the ocean. These ones usually grow to be bigger than the other ones in the world. The Smithsonian Magazine says the largest species of ribbon worm is the bootlace worm, which can be found writhing among rocks in the waters of the North Sea. Not only is it the largest nemertean, but it may also be the longest animal on the planet. Uncertainty remains because these stretchy worms are difficult to accurately measure, but they have been found at lengths of over 30 meters and are believed to even grow as long as 60 meters longer than the blue whale. Despite their length, they are less than an inch around. Now these creatures don't have any natural predators, and let me tell you why. Because they look disgusting. Like, let me ask you guys, would you want to eat that? I would straight up need to be starving and there would literally need to be nothing edible left on the planet other than this thing before I decide to take a bite. It literally looks like a large intestine that just slithers across the bottom of the ocean. Shockingly enough, this is a real thing though, and you can find it chilling in deep waters. Number 2 on this list is zombie worms. We aren't quite done with the worm talk yet, guys, because now we have got to look at zombie worms. Zombies are a pretty terrifying monster, so are these just like them? The Smithsonian says zombie worms don't crave brains, instead they seek bones. The 1 to 3 inch Osedax worms were first discovered in the bones of a rotting gray whale on the deep sea floor nearly 10,000 feet deep in 2002. Since then, more Osedax species have been discovered. There are 26 according to the World Register of Marine Species. Zombie worms don't eat mineral bones directly, instead they digest fats within the bone. However, their style of eating is quite different from ours because they don't have a mouth or a stomach. They secrete an acid from their skin that dissolves bone, freeing up the fat and protein trapped inside. Then, symbiotic bacteria living in the worm's body digests the fat and protein. How Osedax acquire nutrients from the bacteria isn't known. They may simply digest the bacteria, or nutrients are somehow transferred to the worm. They hold on to whatever bones they can find by drilling in with roots which contain the symbiotic bacteria. Zombie worms can retract these plumes into the body when they are disturbed. If all this isn't strange enough, the only worms doing any drilling are female. The microscopic males live inside their bodies. One study counted 111 males inside just one female zombie worm. This eliminates the pesky step of having to search for a mate because the eggs and sperm are right next to each other. Then the worms can disperse many fertilized eggs far and wide, hoping that they land near some recently fallen bones. Needless to say, but these are some weird freaking creatures. No wonder we've nicknamed them zombie worms. They're about as monstrous as you could possibly get. Not to mention, but they feast on the bodies and bones of the dead, similarly to what zombies would want to be doing. Number 1 on this list is the Sloane's viperfish. As with most things on this list, we have a thoroughly disgusting looking creature. This thing is just as dangerous as it is disgusting though. The Twilight Zone says, like many of the inhabitants of the deep sea, Sloane's viperfish sport light-producing organs called photophores along its body. These flashing blue, green, or yellow lights might attract tasty snacks, but they're most useful for masking the fish's silhouette from predators below. They're also useful for grabbing a meal. When prey comes near, the viperfish drops a glowing light on its dorsal fin ray like a fishing lure in front of its mouth and snap! A muscular jaw filled with clear, sharp teeth comes crashing down like a guillotine. Lucky for the viperfish, its first vertebrae has evolved to act as a shock absorber for that powerful bite. This is the deep sea version of a piranha, except way more deadly. If you were getting attacked by piranhas, there would likely need to be multiple of them to attack you to actually win. I could totally see a world though where you lose one-on-one versus this thing though. Its teeth would literally dig so deep in your body. Even at the thickest part of your body, this thing has the potential to go all the way through if it bites you well enough. Thank goodness it's swimming thousands of meters below us and we don't need to worry about it popping up on our next snorkeling adventure.